right, well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Village Church. My name is Clint. I'm one of the pastors here at Village Church. Specifically, I serve as campus pastor at our Chester location, and so we are, in fact, excited to be getting back going next week down in Chester, and so we'll be at the Cultural Center of India building. If you don't know where that is, be on the lookout. You'll see some information coming out this week for all the logistics and all on that. But we're getting back in gear, as Pastor James was saying. We'll be here at 9 and 11 and 10 in Chester. And so we are excited to get back into that. Excited for AC, I think, right? Are you guys excited for AC? Maybe you are. A lot of folks I know have liked the outdoor service. We've enjoyed it. It's been great to be out here. I've been catching a tan every Sunday morning out here, and so I'm going to miss that element of it. It looks like I've been at the beach every week because of the hours that were spent out here on Sunday morning. But it is going to be good to get back going, and that's really for this reason. Village Church exists to worship God by helping as many people as possible become fully devoted followers of Jesus. That's our mission statement here. We say it each and every week in the welcome, and hopefully you know it. But it's more than a mission statement. It's just not there to be a catchy phrase or something that we need for the website, but rather it's there to remind us of who we are and what it is that we are to be about. As God's people, as God's church, our mission is to make disciples as individuals and as a church. And it is what we need to get back to. And so that's really one thing that I wonder if that's what we're excited about getting back into. I know COVID has kind of twisted everyone's schedule up to some degree or not, and all of our lives have been disrupted in some way, shape, or form. A lot of us want to get back to things as normal, but I think for followers of Jesus, it's my hope and prayer to remind us this morning that what we ought to be anxious to get back to is making disciples. Now, I know that the mission of Jesus hasn't been halted by COVID. The gospel can't be stopped. It won't be. And so that is a reality, but it is my hope to remind us again this morning that, man, let's be eager to get back to that. Let's be eager to get that back to that on Sunday mornings, even more so than we have been recently. Mission is the heartbeat of the church. Jesus has designed churches. He's designed discipleship. His means for reaching the world, his means for that is through the church. The church is Jesus' plan A for filling the earth with his glory. And that's the business that we need to be about. Each and every disciple has that mission. Each and every church has that mission. And so I hope that that's what you are excited to get back to. Now, Jesus is going to remind us of this vision, and so we're going to go ahead and we'll be in Luke 10, verses 1 and 2. Most of the morning we'll be in some other texts, but that's going to be the main one that we're in. So Luke 1 through 2 says this: After the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them out on ahead of him, 2 by 2, into every town and place where he himself was about to go. And he said to them, The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly for the Lord of the harvest to send out more laborers into the harvest. Now, first thing this morning, point number one this morning is I wonder if you see the world the way that Jesus does. Do you see the world the way that Jesus does? This text gives us that vision, and the main vision that Jesus gives there is that there's a harvest to be had, and that harvest is plentiful. Now, I don't know about you guys. Steve was talking about it a little bit last week, but you may have had a garden this year, or maybe this was the first time you did a garden, or maybe that's something that you do. But one thing is for sure, and there's remnants of this in our culture too, because each fall, what do we have? We have harvest parties, right? We get excited about the harvest. And if you ever gardened, I grew up on a farm, and so, this year we did do a bit of gardening, but the most exciting time is harvest time. Even last night as we were walking around our house, my daughter said, Daddy, come here. And what she wanted to show me was that one of our tomatoes, which the plant broke in half, but somehow it's still producing tomatoes, one of them turned red. And she was so excited to see it, and to show me that. And we also had, this is not a plentiful harvest, so it doesn't fit the picture of what Jesus is saying here. We do have one ear of corn that's actually ready out of our 10. So it's nothing impressive, but the harvest is an exciting time. But the reality is, we know that the work normally goes in before the harvest. There's a lot of work to do, but Jesus here is saying that the harvest is ready. He doesn't talk about the planting, doesn't talk about the cultivation, he doesn't talk about any of that. He says there's a harvest that is ready, and he sends these folks out into it. Jesus, who incarnates, the Son of God who put on flesh, came, looks out on a creation of people who have nothing but a history of rebelling against him, and says the harvest is plentiful. Jesus looks at the lost world and what is condemned in sin, and he sees it as ripe for harvest. In fact, the captives are ready to be set free, the sick are ready to be healed, and the dead are ready to be made alive. The thirsty are finally going to have living water. Jesus has brought the kingdom of light, and that was invading the domain of darkness. Now, this is a pivotal moment in history. Remember that since Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, the entire world has been captive to sin, right? I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the world's nuts, isn't it? I mean, depravity is on display more than ever. If you go through the New Testament and you read just some of the lists of who men are in their sin, man, it's on display right now. But understand, that's the harvest. Jesus looks out into that and he sees a harvest. Now, this is a pivotal moment because the Son of God came to give men what they need, reconciliation with God. Let us not forget, that's what everybody needs. So when we look around the world and we see a broken people, we see a people raging, we see a people confused, we need to look at it and we need to see a harvest. Now, how do you do that? Well, you look at Jesus. See, Jesus has the vision that we need, and the vision that Jesus has must be the vision that we have. If you look out into the world, you're going to be tempted to say there's no harvest there. Now, Jesus also gives us a vision of that harvest, but he also gives us a vision of being sent. There's a harvest there, but hey, when it's harvest time, that means it's go time. If you guys have ever been around farms or anything like that, these guys sit around, they wait for the crop to come into fruition, and man, it's go time. When it's harvest time, everybody's working. There's laborers, more laborers are needed during that time of the year than any time of the year. And so that's the picture that Jesus is painting here. Now, one thing we got to understand is that when Jesus sends these 72 out, he's commissioning them. They believed him. They believed in who he was. They saw what he was doing. He was a man with authority like no one else. They recognized that he was God, and so they had no problem listening. They had no problem going. He sends them ahead. He sends them because there's a lot of work to do. We need to understand that every follower of Jesus needs to know that they are sent. We have to have a sent identity. I wonder if you have a sent identity. To be sent is to have an agenda. You go to do something. Now, who sends? Well, Jesus. Where does he send you? Well, in this case, he sent them ahead into the towns, but the reality is Jesus at minimum sends you where you're at. He sends you where you're at. Now, for some, you may go to the nations. For some, you may go to your neighborhood. For some, you may go to your workplace. For some, you may go there. Really, that's all of us. Everywhere you go to be sent is to understand that Jesus sends you there with an agenda, and that agenda is to share the gospel, to declare the good news, to reap a harvest. Now, you might say, why me? Well, because he said. Because he said. It's key, it's crucial. We must see Jesus. We must see who is giving this command. And so this morning, we need to understand that we need to have an agenda of making disciples. That's not an agenda of going and being just nice. That's not an agenda of going and just making friends. It's not an agenda of going just to hang out. But rather, it's an agenda to make disciples. That is the mission. Now, I think too often we struggle with our vision of that. And if you don't have the vision of that, you're never going to actually go. And so we see some vision correction. If you look through the Gospels, the disciples are always kind of getting hammered by Jesus. Jesus hammers them, corrects them. They needed LASIK vision. He's going to give it to them here in John chapter 4. But in John 4, we all know pretty much the story. Jesus and his followers enter into Samaria. They stop for lunch. The disciples go into the town. Jesus hangs out at the well. A woman's at the well. She's a Samaritan woman, so she's a Samaritan. She's a woman. That's a problem. Even she recognizes it. Says, "How can you, a Jew, ask me to get you a drink?" Jesus has a conversation with her. Jesus helps her see her need for him. He helps her see that she's thirsty. You see, Jesus sees that woman, and he sees somebody who's ripe for harvest, and the disciples kind of show us what we might tend to see sometimes. They return, and they try to stop it. They try to cut it out. They say, "Jesus, why are you talking to this woman? What's wrong with you?" You see, they saw an outcast that was forever lost in sin, and Jesus saw somebody who was thirsty for living water, somebody who was ripe for harvest. Now, so easily we overlook folks, but here in John 4:35, Jesus adjusts their vision. 4:35 says, "Do you not say, 'There are yet 4 months, then comes the harvest'? Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes, see that the fields are white for harvest." The woman runs to the town and lets them know that the Christ, the one who could tell them everything about her, is here. Could it be the Christ? And all these people, all these Samaritans come running out, these half-breeds, these folks who were written off by the Jews, these folks who God's people looked at as people beyond the scope of redemption. They're coming out. Jesus says, "Look, the harvest is now." It's not in the future, it's now. Jesus has brought the kingdom. The king has arrived. It's time to go. So there is a harvest to be had. Now, I understand it's 2020, and when we look out at it, we may not see a harvest. We may see madness. But understand, Jesus needs to correct our vision. So don't have the year 2020 vision. You need 2020 vision that Jesus has. There is a harvest to be had, but some things to keep in mind is this: don't overlook people, don't write people off. The people that you come into contact with that are all around you in all your spheres of life, so easy to look at them, especially in this day and age, and just say, they're too far gone. Not care about them, not engage them, not seek to take the good news of Jesus to them. No, we just sometimes write them off. Are you writing off folks? Also, in this time, it is important to remember that as we have a conflicting worldview and we need to stand firm in that, we need to boldly proclaim that, we also need to realize that we're not just enemies of the culture and them enemies of us, we're missionaries to the culture. We're not going to win arguments, we're going to win souls. That's the mission. And that's what we need to do. Be sharpening yourself, be compassionate, understand that you yourself, if you're in Jesus, once were just like them. Remember the cross, remember the mission, remember Jesus' death for you. You didn't change yourself, He changed you. Now, another thing to remember is we won't win anybody in the culture by blending into the culture. It's not a time to enter in to the culture and to go along with them. It's a time to be countercultural. That's needed. That adorns the truth of the gospel. That gives you a real platform to declare the good news of Jesus, and that's what we must do. Do not capitulate to the culture. Just be authentic. Be authentic. You believe the gospel. You believe a lot of things that other people don't. Be okay with that. Be compassionate, be truthful, and share. Now, it's one thing to see, but it's another thing to go. But to go, number 2 this morning, you got to be available. Are you available to labor for Jesus? Are you available to labor for Jesus? One of the most striking things in the Bible is the reality that God uses unspectacular people all the time. You see, many of us, when we look out at God's mission, when we think about the reality that we need to be making disciples, we just don't think we can do it. Well, last time I checked, God is in the changing business. God's in the equipping business, and the reality is you can't do it on your own, but Jesus is the one who's going to make fishermen into fishers of men. That's what He says He's going to do, and that's what He does. He's the one who gives boldness to the timid. He's the one who gives you power and strength when you're weak. We got to remember that. It's not about you. It's about what God's going to do in and through you. He's going to supply the power. He's getting the glory. That's how it is. Now, your ability is not necessarily required, but your availability is. Jesus needs your availability. That's what He cares about. That's the criteria that you need to be worried about meeting. Now, the 72 were normal people as far as we know. They didn't have a whole lot going on that would be abnormal to the things that each and every one of us have going on. They have their lives. But their response to the king, and when He commissions them, their response is a yes. Their response is on the table. Their response is the only response that you can have when God shows up in flesh and does the things that He was doing. When He heals the sick, when He raises the dead, when He demonstrates authority over demons, when He preaches with authority unheard of, unseen. Your yes is on the table. I will follow that guy. That's the standard that He lays down just previous to this in the end of Luke 9. Luke 9, 57-62 says, as they were going along the road, someone said to Him, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus said to him, foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay His head. To another He said, follow me. But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. Jesus said to him, leave the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God. Yet another said, I will follow you, Lord, but let me first go say farewell to those at my home. Jesus said to him, no one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. Now, Jesus' point here is you must be available for Him. You must be available to follow Him. There is a cost. There is a cost to following Jesus, and you will lose much. But the reality is you have far more to gain when your yes is on the table. You see, in these examples, there is no negotiating with Jesus. There's no clause. There's nothing other than, yes, my yes is on the table. I'm down for whatever. That's got to be our response to Jesus. To have faith, then, is to surrender. Faith in Jesus means that you are willing to hold everything in a loose hand. Faith in Jesus means that you have been dethroned when it comes down to your schedule, what you do with your life, what you're seeking with your life, what you're pursuing with your life. You've been dethroned. Jesus is on that throne, and you gladly will follow him. You see, for disciples of Jesus, Jesus isn't one of many things in your life. Jesus is the thing in your life. Everything else must revolve around him. You don't put him on the back burner. Your yes is on the table. That's your focus. That's your priority. Now, the things that he lists in here are tough because they are things that we cling to. They are things that keep us from being available for Jesus. And the reality is, it's kind of a picture of what happens to the third type of the soil that's in the parable of the soils. You see, a wannabe disciple, as all these guys really were, came and said, yeah, we like the idea of following you, Jesus, but we've got some other things to take care of. And those idols kind of get exposed. But in that parable, what happens is those people who hear the word, who receive the word, they get choked out by the cares of the world. Now, one of those things is comfort. Now, we love comfort. If we think about it, it really drives almost everything that we do. We avoid discomfort at all possible places, but the reality is, if we're going to follow Jesus, we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And the gospel answers that. Your only comfort in life and death is the reality that you belong to Jesus. That's the comfort that you need. That's the comfort that actually will be comforting. There is none other. Convenience, man, that gets in the way sometimes. Again, we certainly love convenience. Wasn't convenient for these guys. Like I said, they had other stuff going on. But what happened was these 72 received the call and they went. Another one, safety. Now, we love safety. We've been hearing safety is our number one priority. I mean, imagine responding to Jesus and saying, I'm not going to risk my life. In the text that follows here, he says he's sending them out as sheep among wolves. There's no such thing as safety when your yes is on the table to Jesus. It's not a call to be reckless. It's not a call to be careless. But the disciples, the apostles, the early Christians, folks around the world right now know nothing of safety. That's not what they care about. What they care about is, like the Apostle Paul, they care about their life glorifying Jesus in their life and their death. That's what they're concerned about. That's what they're praying for. I wonder if that's what we're praying for. Security. We love security. We don't want to have anything mess with the plan that is ahead for us. We want to see everything. We don't want the unseen. It's just not compatible. The gospel says that you're secure in your union with Christ. All things are working together for your good and for his glory. That's the security that you need. Jesus turns us from security to sacrifice. Jesus turns us from security to sacrifice. What could cause a man to lay down his life? What could cause us to abandon our lives, to lose our lives, to gain life? Well, only Jesus. Only seeing him properly. Only seeing that he's God incarnate come to reconcile man to himself. Your yes is on the table. Now, the cost of discipleship is high, but this shouldn't be confusing to us. It shouldn't be surprising. Did you know anything that you do, anything that's worth doing is a lot of work? The Apostle Paul says that he pummels his body and makes it his slave that he might win more to Christ. You see, if a fighter wants to have a fight, I don't know if you guys are into MMA or boxing or anything, I'm not too into it, but one of the things that I find fascinating about it is that these guys, before the fight, for like the months leading up to it, that's all they do. They leave their homes, they go with their team, they train, they're not around anybody, they abandon their families for that time, they focus. It's a great sacrifice, but they're fighting in front of the entire world. It's just like that for us, for Jesus. It does require great sacrifice, but we get to carry the mission of Jesus, the good news of the gospel, to people and make disciples. There isn't anything better than that. That must be the heartbeat of our life. Lastly, this morning, are you willing to be used by God to reap the harvest? Are you willing to be used by God to reap the harvest? The 72 were used to reap the harvest. They went and they saw amazing things. In fact, in Luke 10:17, it says that the 72 returned with joy, saying, "Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name." It was worth it for them. They had a front seat. They got to see God work. They got to see the good news of the gospel go and be received by people. They went to blaze the trail for Jesus. For us, we look back on the cross, the finished work of Christ, and we get to go and be messengers. We get to go and herald the good news. We get to have the agenda of announcing that news to a world that desperately needs it. Jesus invites us into that drama or into that narrative. There's a lot of terms being thrown out today in the culture, one of them narrative. And what we can see about it is that regardless of what narrative is being spun, it captivates people. People find themselves caught up in a narrative. They see the world that way. It controls how they see people. It controls what they do. It controls their mission. I wonder if we're rooted in the grand narrative of Scripture. I wonder if we're feeding ourselves so much that we're actually living in that world like we actually are. The book of Acts didn't end at the end of Acts. The Great Commission was given, and it's not over till the end of the age. We are in that narrative. Are you saturating yourself in that narrative to the point where it's gripped your life and it controls you? That's what we need to see. Look at Matthew 28:18-20. We must constantly come back to this. It says, "And Jesus came and said to them, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age.'" Jesus commissions his followers to go and to make disciples. This is, and we need to understand this, I want to remind us of this today, this is our mission as individuals, but it is our mission as a church as well. In fact, we want to multiply disciples. We also want to multiply churches. And that's what we're doing. That's why we have 2 locations at Village Church. It's to reach more people. That's why we invest in church planning. That's why from the beginning of Village Church, when it was just planted, we were already looking down the pipe and saying, we need to be a part of planting other churches, other gospel outposts. Now, the church is God's plan A for reaching the nations, and there isn't a plan B. And so here at Village, what we want to do is really can be summarized. This is a summarization. It's not everything, but it's what we got time for left. Come and see. We do 3 things. We want people to come and see. We want people to go and be, and we want people to go and tell. Now the church, this is the come and see part, the church is a pillar and buttress of the truth. It's a community where the love that radiates between Christians is seen by the culture, and it's recognized as something that they're lacking. And in fact, Jesus tells us that we'll know disciples by their love. And so the community, we want to be on display. We want to be salt. We want to be light. We want to be a city on the hill. We want people to see that. We want people to come in and see it. We know that that adorns the gospel message. And so we want people to be able to come in, see the community, and then we want to declare the good news as well. The gospel's preached here faithfully. It's something that we do each and every week. We always will be reminding ourselves of the gospel. But our hope is that more and more folks come to hear. We got to be pulling people in. Are you engaged in that? Are you out inviting people into church? Are you out building relationships so that you can invite people into the church? How about go and be? Go and be. You know, each morning we end the service with go live the mission. Now, it's not something that we just end the service with. It's not just the segue. It's a hope that what we've encountered this morning or what we encountered that morning has shaped us, changed us, and we want to be sent out into the culture. We want to go and be. We want to go into the places of your work, your play, your community, your schools, your neighborhoods. Wherever you are, you want to go and live like a Christian. You want to live what will be seen as a questionable life. Don't bow the knee to any but Jesus. We'll stick out in this culture if we're living faithfully. And that's what we need to be able to do. Number 3, go and tell. Go and tell. Living a questionable life will enable us to have questions asked to us. Is anybody asking you about your life? Is anybody asking you to give a reason for the hope that you have? If they aren't, why not? You see, when we live questionable lives, when we live counterculturally, people take notice and they ask questions. We've got to be a people who are eager to share the reason for the hope, and our hope is the gospel. The hope's not in your presentation. It's not in any of the gimmicks and things that you can use. Those are all fine. But the reality is the gospel has the power to save, and that's what we need to declare. God is making his appeal through us when we declare the good news. We need to focus on that. Lastly, we need to serve. We need to be a church where 80% of the people are engaged in what we're doing. We don't want to be a church where 20% of the people are engaged at what we're doing. If you're newer to Village, or if you've been here for a while, we want you in on this. We want you to be a part of what's happening here. We want you to be engaged in what we're doing in our mission to obey Jesus and to seek and make disciples. So this morning, we just need to think about these questions. Do you see the harvest that is to be had? Does your vision need to be corrected? Do you understand that you're sent? Do you understand that you're sent into this culture to go and win it? Because Jesus has all authority, and he's with us to the end of the age. Are you available for Jesus? Is there stuff in the way of you being equipped? Is there stuff in the way of you going out? Need to refocus. Need to get going on that. Need to remove those things. And lastly, are you willing to be used? There is no other worthy endeavor of your life, of your time, your energy, your sweat, your blood, your tears, all of that must be poured out into the work of making disciples and it's worth it. Beat your body for that. Bring it under control and leverage that and make disciples. Each and every morning here at Village Church, we celebrate the Lord's table. And so if you came in, you might have noticed we have some communion items over there. If you didn't get one, feel free to go over there and grab one. But the juice represents the blood of Jesus that was poured out. The cracker represents the body of Jesus that was broken for us. Reflect on that. Reflect on the reality that Jesus showed up to save you from your sin, from your old life. He gave you a new life. And the reality is, He needs your availability. He needs you to be willing to go out, take the gospel to the culture. He's wanting to do a work in you. Think about that. Reflect on that this morning. If you're a follower of Jesus, those tables are open to you this morning. Eat, drink, and worship.